Curse of the Sea Rats is a game I've long been excited for since I learned about it during its Kickstarter days, but now it's finally here. Does this rodent sink or swim? Let's find out. The story it follows four prisoners are en route to judgment by the British Empire, whose fate it takes a dark turn when the ship they are aboard is destroyed in a vicious attack. Now in the aftermath they find themselves transformed into rats by the infamous pirate witch Flora Burn. She has also abducted the captain's child. Now we must find Flora, reverse the curse, save the child, and in return will be granted our freedom. I enjoyed the story, it's got some twists, some unexpected allies, a good cast overall, and it's also a strong delivery, but here is the big problem. I do not know the ending because it's... Okay, let me try that again. I beat the final boss and it crashes. Okay, the game crashes. I beat the entire game and that was my reward at the final cutscene. If you do enjoy the video today, consider subscribing, helps a huge amount. Also, I do suggest you watch all of this video, as sadly as you've seen there, Sea Rats does have a lot of issues in its current state. So yes, Curse of the Sea Rats is a Metroidvania, and it offers a somewhat simplistic map to navigate and the promise of 10 to 12 hours of gameplay. For me, that translated to just shy of 7 hours, and I had seen a 95.83% of the map. Additionally, all four characters, they have individual skill trees, which we will get to, but these were also fully unlocked. First of all, you're going to be seeing two opinions of this game. It's either going to be too easy or too hard, because enemies, they do spike in difficulty. It's an area that developers promised to address in their day one patch with balancing tweaks. The camp I fall into though is too easy. There's just way too many opportunities to exploit the game's setup. Namely, as I mentioned, we unlock a skill tree with skill points that enemies do drop. Within about 15 minutes of the game and crossing my first boss encounter, I identified every time you change a screen, the enemies they respawn, and I found a location with two enemies that dropped around 200 XP, so I just sat there and farmed it for around 20 minutes. Basically what I did here is I unlocked about 50% of the skill tree, and because of this I was overpowered now for the entire journey. Now some will no doubt say in the comments, well, you shouldn't play it like this, but if the game lets me do it, then in my opinion it is a fair game. It also identifies a core issue though, and that is enemies should gradually lower the amount of XP they reward as the character does a level, and that's because, as you can see, my character was also leveling up core stats as well, which is automatic. That level is noted above the health bar at the top of the screen. Basically, I was not only unlocking new skills, I was also gaining more strength and defense at the same time. By the end game, I unlocked all four characters' full skill trees. Each are unique. I was level 30 something. I was also left with near 400,000 skill points remaining that I had absolutely nothing to do with. My character of choice then was David Douglas. He's the protagonist you've seen in the majority of promotion, and he has a particular skill that is just incredible, and that is if you land a hit, you regain health. So basically, if you hit quicker than your enemies, you're gonna be just fine. It made every single interaction I had extremely simple, outside of a couple of boss encounters that were designed to be tackled from a range. Now with my exploit breakdown out of the way though, how is the gameplay itself? And I'd say the platforming has some fun moments and gradually dials up the challenge, but the combat could definitely do with some work. It just feels sluggish. We have a few abilities as well: strike up, strike down, deliver jumping attacks as well. Even a magical ranged attack. David's is a gun, which has its own unique skill tree. Others include a character that turns into water, but it never feels all that beneficial. We can also dash and crawl as well, which will be needed, and this also varies by character. So for example, David dashes forward, another one dashes backwards for a more defensive feel. The big problem with combat, it doesn't feel all that responsive. The reach of both yourself and your enemies feels slightly outside of the animations, and then there's a parry system which I largely ignored because it doesn't feel right. The animation doesn't really indicate when is the correct time to press it, so you're left mostly guessing, or at least that's the case until you can just bash enemies and regain health, as I've already mentioned. The platforming, on the other hand, it fares a lot better. We can cling to platforms, there's multiple secret rooms, and yeah, just things like major drops being below you. It definitely adds some intensity to the experience. My main complaint with the platforming though is the game kind of breaks its own rules. It starts the experience, you can drop down any gap to find the platform below. Then all of a sudden halfway through it changes, and now some locations, if you drop down, it leads to instant death. It leads to a loop where you're constantly questioning yourself. You're checking the map to see if there's a gap to find, because if there is, it's safe. If not, there is death ahead of you and you'll be heading back to the last checkpoint. Never been a fan of this sort of implementation. Personally, I do prefer consistency. When it comes to the world as well, we will be learning new skills like a double jump and super jump, but the world mostly, it's not really designed around this. Rather, it's finding keys to unlock pathways or helping locals with smaller side quests, which were particularly fun. It makes the whole world feel alive. You'll also face plenty of bosses, not just for the main quest either, but rather those that simply inhabit this world, like necromancers and witches. It's definitely recommended you save frequently as well, and this is done by visiting a save location that heals you up. It also allows you to switch characters who level up in unison with you, and you can of course spend your skill points. You can also visit fast travel portals and stores to add items to your inventory, such as health packs, which can be attached to a quick access menu with the right trigger. Here's where Curse of the Sea Rats truly fell to pieces for me though. As I've mentioned in story, the end game, don't want to show it and I'm keeping my description here light, but there's a character that can assist you that kept on disappearing unless I constantly switched characters, and then it also forced me to backtrack the entire map, which is an absolute slog, and yeah, it just feels like unnecessary padding. Finally, it was topped off then with the end game boss encounter. I was successful, but then the game crashed. To try and overcome this, I actually saved in between because it's kind of this, I guess, multi-stage affair, let's say, but I can't even now load onto that screen. All of that effort, 7 hours of grind, and I cannot see the final cutscene. It is frustrating, and it's worth knowing as it's not on the day one patch notes at this point. I've also not seen this mentioned elsewhere. Performance-wise as well, it's really location dependent. It can get quite choppy in some areas and the frame rate drops, they are noticeable. Wouldn't say it's too bad, honestly. It caused me very few issues, but it can at times make the platforming in key moments feel a little bit unresponsive. It's also worth noting that the game supports up to 4 players locally, but I was unable to test this. Now my understanding here is it elevates the issue, but they are aware of this and will address it in the day one patch with some stability tweaks. I still feel like I experienced the full game because, well, I did. It's just, I want the payoff of the story, the final cutscene, all of my hard work. That's what it's kind of leading to, so it's for sure frustrating. Technically though, I mean it's got a game-breaking bug at the very end of the game, and you all saw my save file. The few percent of the map that are missing, they are secret locations and a few smaller rooms that I skipped because I had no need for any more XP. I had high hopes from a gameplay perspective with Curse of the Sea Rats, and it does succeed in some areas, but it's also let down by some design quirks, and yeah, I really don't know what to say about this one. Did I have fun overall? And honestly, I did. It's just, its issues at the same time are so obvious. Visually then, I really do like what they've done with this one. The character animations are often stunning with a cartoon-like design. The same can be said for the enemies, the boss encounters, as well as the supporting cast. I just think there's a huge amount of charm in here. The world itself also packs some nice locations, from caves to waterfalls to more mystical locations, think like castles. Cutscenes are also stunning as well, they're presented in a similar cartoon style. What I didn't like, I found the locations lack detail, the texture work at times is non-existent, and there's also a heavy amount of pixelation due to their 3D design. Audio finally, generally I'm impressed. It's fully voice acted, and sure, like occasionally the acting doesn't land, but it's an indie and respect to them for going to this level. It absolutely helps with the immersion and bringing these characters to life. It's reinforced then with a solid selection of effects, the enemy attack sound particularly good, and the music, it adds a whimsical Pirate's Life vibe to the whole world. So overall, Curse of the Sea Rats, it was a game I was excited for, and sadly it did disappoint. You can exploit its mechanics and setup, the combat feels sluggish at best, the parry system is pretty much useless, honestly. The frame rate fluctuates, and the endgame, it feels like it's out to artificially expand the runtime, if I'm being completely honest. It's also got a crash that blocks me from seeing the endgame animation, which is particularly frustrating, and I'd argue game breaking for those that are here for the narrative payoff. The pros though, I did enjoy the platforming, the world is well designed, there's some fun boss encounters even with the combat scheme that's implemented, and then the animation, no question, is stunning. It's really a funny one, I still had fun, but the problems are clear. So with that in mind, do be aware of the crash issue going in, but even if that issue was fixed, I'd be calling this one an average 5 out of 10. For every good point, there is a problem or a weird quirk to counterbalance it. Will you be checking out Curse of the Sea Rats then? Let me know in the comments. With that, hit subscribe, join us here for reviews and deals daily, and I'll see you all on the next